Everyone, David Aragona here, taking a look at one of the graded stakes events on Saturday at Monmouth Park. Race 11 is the Grade 3 Monmouth Stakes, going the 9 furlongs for the older runners on turf, hoping for a firm turf course on Saturday. I think there are some scattered thunderstorms predicted through the late evening on Friday, so we'll see if that affects the turf condition. But there's been nice weather in the Northeast area this week, so I think we're probably going to have a suitable turf course for this Monmouth Stakes as we throw up this field of 9 runners. Haven't yet seen the morning line for this one, and frankly, I'll be interested to see how it looks since it seems like a pretty confusing, wide open race. Chad Brown has a couple of runners in here, the number 6 at Homo, as well as the number 9 running B. I think the latter of the two comes in with better form. A horse like the number 5, Siege of Boston, could vie for favoritism. He's coming off a decent performance against much tougher in the Grade 1 Turf Classic, but he is a horse that does like to come from off the pace, and I think one of the talking points in this Monmouth Stakes is that there really is not a whole lot of speed signed on him. We can see that when we throw up the Timeform US pace projector for this mile and an eighth affair. And while there's no favors front runners flag showing up or a no speed flag showing up, you can see that the 3 horses that are shown across the track leading early, the number 2 Beatbox, the number 4 Grand Sonata, and the number 9 Running B, when you look through their past performances, none of them are front runners. I mean, at best, Running B has led from gate to wire on occasion. He did that back in November of last year at Aqueduct when he won an optional claiming race. So potentially they'll go back to those tactics in this race. But Grand Sonata, he's more of a stalking mid-pack type. I think you could say the same about Beatbox, even going back to the number 6 at Homo, who's shown in 4th early, I should say. I mean, he's stalked on occasion, but certainly not a front-running type. So hard to really know who is going to wind up on the lead here, and I think it creates a level of uncertainty when you're handicapping this Monmouth Stakes. Let's go through this field in post-position order, beginning with the number 1, California Frolic, and he's likely to be a long shot in this race. Coming out of the local prep for this, the Cliffhanger was never really able to launch a rally that day, was about 3 wide around the track, but you can't really use the pace as an excuse when the winner of that race, Data Man, looped the field to close from last to first, so he just wasn't quite as good as those foes. Now he's stepping up against tougher company. He would be a bit of a surprise in this Grade 3 event. The number 2 is Beatbox, and if you're going to make a case for this Cherie DeVoe runner, I think it is that he just did not handle the soft course last time at Pimlico. That's a turf course that was basically as boggy as it gets. You can see in his Timeform US PPs, the 1 track condition rating next to the soft rating for the turf course in that race rating box, and that just indicates that on the 1 to 10 track condition rating scale that we use at Timeform US, 1 indicates that it was as slow as a turf course can possibly get. That course had taken so much rain. Some horses just were not handling it whatsoever, and I think Beatbox falls into that category. He's a bigger, rangier son of Pioneer of the Nile that appears to have some white to him, and sometimes those horses just sink into the ground and don't get over those bottomless turf courses. So not going to hold that against Beatbox. He had run much better in his prior races at fairgrounds throughout the winter, but this horse has done a lot of running going all the way back to October of last season at Keeneland. We're really without a break right up on through June like it is now. So maybe a little bit concerned that that performance in the dinner party was not just attributed to the soft turf course, and maybe he's tailing off a little bit. He also does have to do his best running without Lasix here, and note that all of his best races did come with Lasix through the winter at fairgrounds. So that's a mild concern for Beatbox, but I do think that if he gets back to his better races, he could be considered a contender in here. The number 3 is Public Sector. This was a former Chad Brown runner who was purchased last year for just $35,000 at Keeneland November, switched over to Saffie Joseph, and he hasn't won for the new barn, but he's done some decent things since coming into the Saffie Joseph stable, placed in a couple of $50,000 claiming races, stepped up last time to try the Grade 2 Pan American, and only lost that race by a length at 25-1. A decent effort by him, but going back through that Pan American field, probably not the strongest Grade 2 event that you're ever going to see. The runner-up, Harry Hood, is another horse who was coming out of much lesser races into there, went off at a big price. The winner, Cortez, has since disappointed in at least one tougher spot, trying the Man of War, not running well after taking money in that race. So I'm a little skeptical of the class of Public Sector, and he really seemed to run that faster speed figure last time, trying a marathon for the first time, coming back to a more conventional route distance. I'm concerned that Public Sector might just not class up with this field. The number 4 is Grand Sonata. We'll take a look at his most recent race when he came back from a layoff in an optional claimer at Aqueduct and closed pretty well to get up for second in here. The winner of this race, Turf King, just got an absolutely perfect trip coming through on the inside, splitting horses in mid-stretch, saving all the ground to get the job done. Grand Sonata also got a good trip. He saved ground around the turns, but angled out at the top of the stretch, and it just seemed like the winner cut the corner and got the jump on him. But Grand Sonata finishes well to be a clear second in this race. Another 120 plus time form US speed figure earned by this consistent son of Medaglia d'Oro, who just always seems to run well. Doesn't really get it done in stakes races that often, but he's been right there in some tough spots against strong company going back over the past couple of seasons. And going back through his recent tries in graded stakes company, I think he's run a little better than it seems. Was closing well at the end of that Fort Lauderdale 2-back, which was dominated on the front end by Main Event. And then 3-back in that River City at Churchill Downs. I thought he got an awkward trip that day, was towards the inside, a good position coming around the far turn, but had to pause trying to find room in upper stretch, altered course a couple times, had to go back down to the rail and just lost some momentum trying to search for some room. Didn't lose that far to a Siege of Boston, who's one of his main rivals in here, so I think Grand Sonata definitely fits in this race. And if Javier Castellano wants to, as we saw on that pace projector, this horse might have the tactical speed to go forward if they want to ride him that way. The number 5 is Siege of Boston. Like I said, he's probably one that's going to vie for favoritism in this field, coming out of the Grade 1 Turf Classic last time on Kentucky Derby Day, where he was beaten by the likes of Program Trading, Naval Power, Web Slinger, some of the better turf horses that are in action right now in this division. There was a slow pace going on. You could see those blue color coded Timeform US pace figures. And at a level like that, it's just going to work against a horse like Siege of Boston, who can be a little bit one-paced even on his best day and just didn't have the finishing speed to get in the mix against a competition like he was facing last time. But he's run well in most of his prior starts against Stakes Company. Like I said, was competitive with Grand Sonata, actually finishing ahead of that rival in the River City 4-back, then closed well in tandem with a running B 3-back in that Tampa Bay Stakes, where he just ran out of ground at the end. Also in the Canadian at Gulfstream Park 2-back, again, ran out of ground, but was closing well at the end of that race. It seems like the 9 furlongs works for this horse. I'm a little bit concerned about his running style, since you can get a little bit far back in the early stages. Once upon a time, this horse did win a race gate to wire going back to Gulfstream in March of 2023, but they have not ridden him that way in a very long time, and I wonder if he still possesses that kind of tactical speed. The number 6 is at Hamo. He is one of the 2 Chad Brown trade runners in this race. This one ridden by Flavian Pratt. And I don't really get the management of this horse. They've run him in some really tough spots, and I don't quite understand why. I mean, he did win the Grade 1 United Nations going all the way back to 2022 at Monmouth Park. And I guess being a Grade 1 winner, he's got some obligation to run in other Grade 1 races, but they've kept him on this steady diet of Grade 1 affairs, and he just really hasn't been competitive in a long time. Really didn't run that well in most of his 2023 starts. Put on a decent 3rd place finish in the Arlington Million last summer at Colonial, but that race was falling apart, and he was really just picking up the pieces that day. He's made a couple of starts at the beginning of this year. Can't say that he's easy to recommend off either of those performances. Yes, he's getting some class relief here, but just wonder if this horse still has the form to be competitive in graded stakes company on the turf. So he was not for me in this Monmouth Stakes. The number 7 is Fort Washington, and he's got some races going back through his form that would make him somewhat competitive in here, but kind of like Siege of Boston, and to an even greater degree, he's a horse that tends to be very pace compromised. He doesn't break that well, tends to go out the back door early, and really leaves himself with a lot of ground to make up. The one time that didn't happen, 3-back at Aqueduct, he was actually able to win when Jose Ortiz kept him closer to the pace. He actually broke sharply that day, and he was able to get him into the mix early. I'm skeptical that they're going to be able to do that in this race, where there just isn't a whole lot of speed signed on, and he tends to break slowly, and I wonder if he could get shuffled a little too far back in the early stages. And if he's trailing this field, it could be really tough to make up that much ground. And furthermore, just seems like Fort Washington has gone off form recently. He didn't run well in the Fort Lauderdale over the winter, albeit in a race that was dominated towards the front end. But then last time at Churchill Downs, coming back off the layoff, he just never mounted any kind of rally. And I think it's fair to wonder if this horse is still capable of producing his top efforts. The number 8 is Tawny Port. Now, he is cross-centered in a stakes event at Churchill Downs, going a marathon distance, so it's going to be interesting to see if he runs there or here, cutting back to the 9 furlongs. And it's kind of interesting since this horse got on turf for the first time for Christophe Clement going back to July of last year. He's really just been on this steady diet of marathon races, going a mile and 3/8, a mile and a half. He had been a horse that had handled a mile and an eighth on the dirt when they were concentrating on that surface. So maybe cutting back in distance is going to be what Tawny Port wants to do. He did win on the turf once, going a mile and 5/8 at Saratoga last summer. So I guess that's given them some confidence to really concentrate on races that bring out his stamina. But recently, his form has hit a bit of a plateau. He ran okay in the Pan American 3-2 back. Like I said, that was a race that I don't think a whole lot of from a quality standpoint, but I suppose you could make the argument that he might have won that race if he had gotten clear a little bit earlier at the top of the stretch. And then last time in the Man of War, he ran fine to be fourth against tougher competition, was never really in the mix that day. This is a slightly easier spot, and maybe coming back will work for him if he does end up running here. The number 9 is Running B, closing out the field. He is the other Chad Brown trainee. We'll take a look at his most recent race when he finished third as the beaten favorite in the Dinner Party Stakes. Now, this was that Pimlico course on Preakness Day that had taken so much rain, and he was one of the horses that actually seemed to handle the course pretty well. He traveled well into the middle portions of the race, took the lead at the top of the stretch, and as you can see, just could not quite go with a couple of closers in the late stages here, but keeps plugging away to get up for third in this race. It was a decent effort. He had run well 2 back in an allowance race, coming off a brief layoff at Keeneland, got the job done, coming from just off the pace, closing into a slow pace that day. So this horse has been in good form. He beat his main rival, Siege of Boston, 3 back at Tampa Bay Downs over the winter. And as I noted with that pace projector, he has that tactical speed that could make him the potential early leader in this race. And I think the horse in that position could be dangerous, especially if it's a horse of the quality of Running B. So I think just based on the trip he's likely to pull, he's one that you do have to consider in this Monmouth Stakes. Let's throw out my picks for this grade 3 event on Saturday. And I'm hoping that the number 4 Grand Sonata goes off at the right price. I just think this horse is coming into this race in deceptively strong form. He's got the tactical speed to be close. And if he is the right price, I would take a shot with him and just cross my fingers that Javier Castellano looks at the form and thinks this might be the right kind of spot to get aggressive and send this horse, maybe not to the front end, but into a good stalking position where he doesn't have too much ground to make up in the stretch. I respect the number 5 Siege of Boston, who was also in good form. Can say the same thing about Running B, though I think he's a little bit obvious going out for the Chad Brown stable. So the number 4 Grand Sonata is the horse that I think is going to offer the right kind of value in the grade 3 Monmouth Stakes on Saturday at Monmouth Park. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.